Hey. Right. Some interesting sporting stories today. Obviously, Leicester play their first game since the helicopter crash at Cardiff. So there'll be a lot of media interest there. Obviously, with some of the media comments being made and some of the media coverage, there's been some criticism of the media coverage that has been of the Leicester City Football Club since the accident last Saturday. So that'll be interesting. There's also been a leaked article, some leaked information to Der Spiegel magazine in Germany about an alleged attempt secret talks between 11 clubs and 5 guest clubs to form a European Super League in 2021. And one of the clubs, Bayern Munich, have come out and said we were not involved in any talks. Now, the reason why they're saying this is because they were caught. This is not the first time we've heard of this European Super League, but Der Spiegel has managed to do some undercover reporting of a lot of things within football and sport lately, and has generally got its information spot on. So clubs like Man United and AC Milan and Real Madrid, they're in the spotlight, and not for good reason. Because UEFA has basically ruled out having a European Super League because they want to have a third European Cup competition to come in around 2021. And obviously, these clubs weren't happy with the UEFA plans for said tournament for whatever reason, or are after the money, and have had apparently alleged secret discussions. I'm surprised, if there is some kind of fallout from this. Also, it's been alleged that UEFA aided PSG and Man City to avoid financial fair play rules, and Giovanni Infantino was obviously in charge of UEFA at the time. So some of the big clubs in football are not getting some positive press this week. And rightly or wrongly, they're under the spotlight. Closer to home, obviously, what happened between Hibs and Hearts is a stain on the game. What happened at Man United with the fan bringing fake firearms onto the pitch. So security at games is a big thing. Really, that's been highlighted a lot. And is there a rise of football violence again? Is it coming back into the spotlight? Quite possibly. Security protocols at stadiums are regularly being reviewed, but there are some clubs that seem to have more of a problem with hooligan elements than others. Also, this weekend, the Autumn International Rugby Union matches, the Autumn Series starts, and it's a good way to assess where teams are in squad depth and selection before next year's World Cup. And England, their pack is severely inexperienced. The backline has caps. So it doesn't matter if he shuffles the back line. Those players have played Test rugby and they know what they're about. It's the England pack is not experienced at all. There's not many experienced players. And obviously Joe Marler now, having stepped away from Test rugby, leaves a big hole in the front row. And Dylan Hartley, his fitness has been questioned. And having co-captains it's been questioned as well. Eddie Jones is under a lot of pressure this autumn to deliver, wins and back from a hideous 12 months where England's form has completely collapsed, and they had a shocking Six Nations. They had an average summer, not great. They lost the Test series against Africa, so they are in a rocky place right now. Also, I'm very surprised by the lack of media coverage and build-up for the second Test match between England and New Zealand at Anfield in the Rugby League. Really surprised by the lack of just the pure lack of coverage. Really, second Test in a 3-test series. 2 of the best rugby league nations in the world. Some of the best rugby league players available in the UK playing. It's the best New Zealand squad that's available. Hardly any coverage. So that's a big void there in press coverage. And again, this is a chance for rugby league really to have a massive opportunity in growing the sport in the UK but worldwide. And the lack of press coverage I find really, really worrying. What am I doing here? Lock the taskbar setting. But There we go. That's what we wanted. Right. Okay. But yeah, I mean, I was just adjusting some of my laptop settings there. I do apologise. So yeah, rugby league has a great opportunity this weekend, as it did last weekend. So is Anfield the right stadium to have a rugby league international? We'll wait and see. Um, they obviously played the first test in Hull, which is a rugby league mad city with 2 professional clubs, and they could half fill the stadium. So I have some concerns that the marketing department of rugby league is not doing its job. Because it's not a full strength New Zealand side. Had it been a full strength New Zealand side or a full strength Australian side, with the result of being different, possibly the atmosphere was very flat. So that's another concern that from watching last week's game that I had. But the lack of press coverage today is really stunning me, because I read the back pages of the newspapers and I looked on the websites. There's not a lot of. There's one article. There is one article. Out of how many about tomorrow's game? That's probably why people won't turn up. I'll be interested to see what the turnout out is at Liverpool Anfield, because St Helens is not actually in Merseyside. Technically, it's on the edge of Merseyside, and it's not close to Liverpool city centre. Wigan's further away. There are clubs in the northwest of England that are rugby league clubs in the Super League, but I question having the test match at Anfield and not necessarily at the DW Stadium in Wigan or in St Helens. So I do question that. I know the third test is at Headingley, but Headingley's sort of in a rebuild with the cricket ground. So I'm questioning some of the stadiums chosen and the marketing strategy done, because if they can't fill the whole city stadium, the KC stadium, that's a worry for me, because that's a rugby league mad city with 2 professional clubs. If they can't fill that, that's a concern. The atmosphere was terribly flat. And is Anfield and is Liverpool the right city to pursue, considering how mad it is for football in Merseyside, with Liverpool, Everton, and across in Birkenhead, Tranmere as professional clubs? Is that really a battle that rugby league's going to win, especially as the football season is full flight? So there we go. But no, it's an interesting one. Obviously, Bradley Wiggins is coming under fire from some quarters about his new book, and in it he lists the Tour de France, disgraced Tour de France winner Lance Armstrong as one of his heroes growing up as a young cyclist, and he's come under criticism for that. But a lot of people aren't reading the full press statement he released, because he does say in that press statement he is critical of the cheating within cycling that took place under Lance Armstrong's era. So he has been criticised for it. I think it's a fair criticism to have, but a lot of people who are criticising haven't read the full press release on launch day of his book, and haven't even, necessarily followed what Lance Armstrong's been saying post retirement. I think the DW, or even playing the game in St Helens, would have been a better bet. But the fact that they couldn't fill the KC Stadium in Hull, where there's 2 professional rugby league teams and a rugby league match, is a worrying sign, considering that both Hull teams at various points have been successful in the last couple of decades, and have been in the top half of the Super League. So I don't know. Obviously, it's a big stadium. Obviously, Liverpool aren't playing at home this weekend, so there's no fixture clash. It's a good surface to play on. It does hold up well. I think that's a good point. But St Helens itself, as a town, is not in the middle of Merseyside. It's on the edge of Merseyside, edge of Lancashire, edge of Greater Manchester. I think Anfield might be a stadium it's going to be hard. If it's half filled, it's going to look really, really crap, like it did last weekend. The atmosphere wasn't great last weekend, and I'm not sure if the Merseyside area, bearing in mind you got 3 professional football clubs playing in the Football League or the Premier League in Liverpool, if they are actually going to be interested in rugby league. If they'd done this match in the summer, I could quite possibly see interest there, because there's no clash between. Well, actually, no, because the World Cup was on, Football World Cup. But I'm not sure that Anfield, as choice of stadium, is the right stadium. I think Headingley, yes, for the third test is. I think the KC Stadium at Hull um, is not necessarily the worst choice, but the fact that in Hull, with two professional rugby league clubs, couldn't draw, I'm not sure if they're either marketing the games right, if they're pricing the tickets right. You know, rugby league has a great opportunity to really grow itself and compete against rugby union when it comes to trying to grab fans for the both codes. Because rugby union is making great strides in the north of England, rugby league is making very limited strides in the south with two teams. You got London Scholars and London Broncos. That's it. That's south of Birmingham rugby league terms professionally. So rugby union leading the way with professional and semi-professional clubs in the north of England. Rugby league is not doing the same in the south of England, and there's a lot of untapped resource, if you know what I mean. But we'll have to see what happens tomorrow. We have to see how big the crowd is. We could be surprised. It could be a sellout. I doubt it will be. I wouldn't be surprised if there's large sections of Anfield that are empty. They have hosted games at Loftus Road before in London, and they sold out QPR's ground. Yes, it's smaller, but QPR and that part of London not really known for rugby league. I know the London Broncos were technically called Harlequins at the time and were playing at the Stoop, which isn't a million miles away from Loftus Road. But I can't help but think that they might have misjudged, and but it could be the only stadium that was available. We don't know. Wigan might be playing, football this weekend at the DW. I always know it's now the DW, and it's obviously a fixture clash because obviously when the international season with rugby league works is middle of summer and end of season like this, because they've synced both the Super League and NRL seasons parallel, which is a smart idea, but also creates problems. In this instance, I think possibly Anfield was the only available stadium over a 20,000 capacity that was available. Perhaps they could have gone to Ewood Park at Blackburn or Turf Moor at Burnley. They're, Lancashire is rugby league country, and seen a slightly smaller stadium. That's still a big stadium. What they could do, but they could have played the game in Wigan or St Helens, where they know there's a rugby league fan base and they know what they can expect. But they went to Hull and they failed to draw a full stadium, which really surprised me. I know there's rivalry between Hull KR and Hull FC, but you would think playing in your city, you would turn out. I think rugby league could be embarrassed tomorrow. I hope the game. I mean, the game might be brilliant, but it's the crowd. It's something that needs to be looked at. We know there are concerns of crowd numbers and people going to games in the Super League and Championship and League One in this country. We had criticism of the Challenge Cup final where the Catalan fans couldn't come over in large numbers, and the criticism of Wembley. So there's a lot of criticisms about crowd numbers within rugby league here in the UK. The NRL does have its own issues where they use Allianz and ANZ, and they again are regularly half empty. So empty seats look really crap for TV. That doesn't mean those seats weren't paid for with the corporate side of it, but I think Anfield could be the wrong stadium. I do agree, but we'll have to wait and see tomorrow. I know that the pitch at Anfield, considering that I have been at Anfield, does hold up rather well to other pitches, and it's had a good surface at Anfield for over 20-25 years. I know the surface at Anfield does hold up well, so we'll have to wait and see what happens. But I think Rugby Union had far better success in the World Cup 3 years ago, and they took test matches to non-traditional stadiums and they packed them. They went to St James's Park and filled it. I know they had the doubleheader at St James's Park. That's the stadium they could have looked at for a test match, St James's Park. We know that when they do host the doubleheader weekend, it does draw well. It's a big stadium. I think the pitch is a good surface as well. And it's a chance to grow the game in the northeast, where you've got obviously Newcastle Falcons, who play at Gateshead technically, but you've got a couple of clubs, rugby union clubs. There is a chance to get some rugby league stamp up in the northeast. They overlooked that, so that's a tried and tested double. The crazy Super League weekend when they play up in St James's Park. That is a tried and tested formula. They know it draws fans when they take the Super League games. They're really surprised they didn't decide to look at hosting a test match there. I think the Newcastle and in fact all of the North East would have been very, very interested in that. It's a chance for them to experience a sport that isn't regularly played in their part of the world, and try and grow the sport again in a non-traditional location. But rugby league seems to have this weird fetish of not trying to grow the sport. So there you go. Yeah, Social Blade is an interesting tool, and I've obviously got 2 channels, so they're both on there. Just plodding along, really. I think Social Blade is like, a sort of, it is a good tool, but at the same time, when they give you your projections, I'm not going to hit 1,000 subscribers, which is a load of horse, because in April I had 80 subscribers in 5 minutes on a live stream. So it's obviously compiling all the data, and I've had a quiet summer as well. So I don't know what it is, but it seems the autumn and spring seems to get me more viewers. I don't know how that works out, but I've had a very, very. There's been a couple of videos in the summer that really did well, but even though I covered almost every single game of the World Cup, I was averaging like 50 viewers a game. So it is what it is. Obviously, some of my friendly YouTubers I have a friendly rivalry with really kicked on, and it didn't sort of work out as well my end, but is what it is. Scunthorpe United, Oxford United. Oxford United are the local team for me. I would go for an Oxford United win just to be a pain in the arse. But again, I don't follow enough of the lower leagues really to have, how should I put it, an idea of who would win. But considering that the weather is a lot colder than it was, so there's a chance of heavy rain in the air and real changeable conditions. There really is. We'll have to see. I know Scunthorpe's pitch is not necessarily the best pitch in the world and can be a heavy pitch, so that's going to come down to fitness. But one thing I forgot to mention at the start of the live stream is what happened to Usain Bolt. Now, he obviously wanted to be a professional football player post-retirement from athletics. The fact he's 32 and has the first touch of a donkey, I think the Gold Coast Mariners gave him a fair shot, a fair crap. And bearing in mind, the A-League is not necessarily, top level football. It's professional, but it's not necessarily top level. And I think, had he been signed, I think that would have damaged, the brand of A-League. They're obviously trying to improve the quality of the league and the quality of players they produce, and they obviously want to improve the standard of play in Australia and New Zealand. I think if Usain Bolt was to get a full-time contract, I think that might have, really harmed the A-League. That's not to say, another professional team somewhere in the world of football wouldn't consider giving him a shot, but I think with his skill set, the only real thing you can have for him is like a stay up centre forward who's good at counter attack and who's got the pace to not have to worry about being caught offside. He's not good enough defensively. He can't head a ball very well. He's good running with the ball. Yes, he's got the pace. He's got the strength to hold off defenders. So there's only one real role you can use him, and that's on a counter attack. But he obviously showed the drive and willingness. Whether it was just a PR stunt or it was actually a legitimate, I want to do this, is up for conjecture. But he's always had an interest in football. He's trained with Borussia Dortmund to keep fit. So he's trained with Borussia Dortmund before. He's trained with, I think, 9 clubs now. And he's had a couple of trials. So it's not as if there's a lack of effort there. And he's not the first sportsman to retire from one sport and look at like a, how do I put it, a cross code or looking at another sport. But I think he's done it a lot later in his career than a lot of other athletes have. It's not as if someone can play AFL, rugby league, and rugby union because they're the footballing codes. It is, I'm going from track and field athletics to football, and obviously the skill set is completely different. Yes, he plays charity football matches, and he's a big driver behind some of these charity football matches and celebrity football matches, and that is fine. But obviously he was serious, I believe. But no, he was regularly criticised for his first touch and his lack of spatial awareness on the pitch. It's not to say he's hopeless, but non-league football players would, I think, have possibly a better skill than him. Brader Feyenoord, I have to admit, there are some teams having shocking starts to seasons. You're one of them. But hey, there's always a chance that the weather plays a part, and there's always a chance of getting that win. So as long as there is a team to put out on the pitch, there's hope. Yes, Feyenoord aren't necessarily the team they were, but Dutch football has declined in the level, not the passion, the quality level. I will say this about Dutch football: they regularly produce very good young, talented players that, depending on where they end up, can be great stars or they just peak a bit earlier. But they do keep producing talented young players of a decent level. And more young Dutch players play in the Dutch league than English players in the English leagues. So I think the Dutch league has a very good youth system. It's just getting those young players to then reach the elite level and be rather than just good players. We're talking about elite good players. But the production of our Dutch players is just never ending. And I think the Dutch need a new philosophy on the national side and a new idea of how to play the game. Because their failure to qualify for the World Cup, has set them back. But then they beat the Germans 3-0. But this German side is also going through a transition period. I think there are, surprisingly, when it comes to European football, there's a lot of Dutch coaches floating about all the leagues as well. There's a lot of Dutch coaches coaching in all leagues and in all countries. So not only are they good at producing players, they also have a lot of football coaches as well. It seems to me that they retain ex-players into coaching roles a lot more as well. Well, I think the Usain Bolt memes are starting. Yeah, Usain Bolt is an interesting one. But you've got to look at other sportsmen who've played multiple or competed in multiple sports. There are a lot out there. Most of them are at, let's say, in the Olympics, for example, or Paralympics. It is not unusual for an athlete to change sports at some point. We've seen it with a whole host of Olympic athletes, but Usain Bolt, obviously he's never shied away from the fact that he's a big fan of the sport and he's always wanted to play. He has come out and said if he wasn't a track and field athlete, he would have probably gone for football or cricket. He has come out very openly and said that the other two sports available in Jamaica, other than track and field, is basically cricket, because the West Indies are mad for that, or as they would call it, soccer. I would AB de Villiers. I would go John T. Rhodes as well. I mean, AB de Villiers, though, yes, I think because of I have some South African friends, and I know they are very big on their sports scholarships in private and public school. I have a friend who was on a cricketing scholarship. It is an interesting talking point. I do think, yeah, he could. I mean, now he's 34 and he has retired because his body is worn out, but he regularly kept himself fit. Very good at catching. I mean, he could have played baseball had he lived in the US or decided to go down that route. I wouldn't be surprised if he could play rugby pretty well as well, both league and union. I do think, yes, he is one of the ultimate athletes. But at the same time, he basically his entire adult life has been constant pushing himself both domestically and internationally in cricket without a break for near on 15 years. And he obviously said enough's enough. I need to stop. I do think he could play a multitude of sports, but this is I think this is the cultural thing with South Africans and Australians. They put more emphasis on sporting scholarships at school and university than I think us in the UK. and they take their professional sports exceptionally seriously in South Africa. Cricket, rugby, well, union. They do play a bit of rugby league, but nowhere near as much. And now what they would call soccer, what we call football. They've hosted a World Cup in all three of the major biggest sports: football, rugby union, and cricket. They're the three sports that people take massively seriously in South Africa from all backgrounds. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, Asian, mixed race. They are religiously followed, and swimming as well. Decos, that, and there's some tennis as well with Anderson. I mean, they do take their sporting side of things very, very seriously. And yes, there are a lot of sporting scholarships. Without sporting scholarships, we wouldn't have players in rugby union like Pat Lambie, for example. So they do take their sport alongside their education very, very seriously. They put more emphasis on it. And hence why they are a great sporting nation. They have produced some unbelievable cricket and rugby union players, and occasionally they produce a damn good football player as well. They really do produce athletes, and AB de Villiers happens to be one of those star athletes who I think was a multi-sportsman at school as well. I think he just happened to be pretty good at cricket, and they said, "Dude, you got a choice here. You can play any of these sports," and he was like, "I'll have that one." But he could have easily played rugby union, cricket, tennis, football. AB de Villiers is just, one of those insane athletes that, is a generational talent. You don't see them often. And, he's not just good at all sports. I think he is he is just a genuine machine. Scunthorpe. Yeah, this is what I said about last season's relegation teams from all the professional leagues here in England. Every team that got relegated had changed their manager at least once. Constantly sacking and chopping managers generally doesn't lead to success. Just putting it out there. Unless you're Chelsea or Real Madrid, you don't get trophies a lot of the time. And team that got relegated from the Premier League sacked their manager. Every team that got relegated from the Championship sacked their manager. Every team that got relegated from League One had sacked their manager, and every team that got relegated from League Two had sacked their manager. So I'm basically going out on a limb here, saying if you constantly sack the manager, you're probably going to get relegated. It's just a bit of market research. It would be nice to see a team that obviously has plans to go up, get off a little skid. But talking about teams that are struggling, I'm trying to debate on my next video topic on the channel. And I'm going to go which Premier League manager gets sacked first. Now, I've got three choices: Warnock, Benitez, and Mourinho. I don't think Wagner's really. They weren't expected to remain up in the Premier League last season. I would go Benitez, Warnock, and Mourinho are the three managers under the most pressure, because Bournemouth were leading United at one point. I do believe, let me just double check the Bournemouth score, because it was 1-1 about half time, I believe. And I think it is still 1-1, unless Bournemouth, it's 1-1 and the game is about to end, and that could be a crucial result because Bournemouth are above Man United in the league, and they're apparently they've been very, very good in defence, and and Bournemouth obviously were 1-0 up in that game. Man United are trying to come from behind yet again. They've conceded first, and parking the bus hasn't worked because a team has found a way through that defence, and now they are being forced to play a game that Mourinho just doesn't either have the tactics to or the players to, which is an expansive game against a very solid Bournemouth side that I think are aiming for European football this season, and above them in the league. So I'm not surprised Bournemouth are holding Man United to a 1-1 draw at home. I think Ed has got his squad perfectly balanced with the players he's got, with the availability of funds that he has. He's got them playing in the right way as a team. How was he not considered for the England job when Southgate was given it? I don't know. But there you go. I think Eddie Howe is a future England manager, no doubt. And I wouldn't be surprised if Eddie Howe is one of the first English managers to win silverware in the better part of, since Harry Redknapp, I think. that's my personal view. And I think Eddie Howe is going to be the first English manager to win any silverware for better part of 15 years. I honestly believe that. I think Eddie Howe is one of the few guys, English managers, who's got the nous to lift a trophy. I'm not sure if Wagner is are going to get sacked because they obviously Huddersfield weren't expected to stay up last season. I honestly believe that Rafa Benitez and Mourinho and maybe Warnock, they're the ones to look at possibly not being there by the season. And Benitez has come out and said if he's not given the support in the transfer market, if he gets that far with Newcastle, he will walk away. First time this season you're not going to a Peterborough game. Wow. I will say this to anyone on it. You're not going to be able to go to every single game. It is an expensive adventure unless you're a season ticket holder and you've got a good season ticket deal when you got your season ticket. To go to every game is an expensive exercise in any sport, and there's no harm in not being able to go to every single game. Some fans can afford to do it, others can't, and that is the issue that football, especially, is finding is ticket pricing is causing a lot of fans not being able to go to the game. And again, this raises the debate of corporate tickets. I know Peterborough aren't obviously in the Premier League, but corporate tickets is a big concern because when a club waiting list for tickets, because you've sold X percentage of your tickets to corporate, and those seats aren't actually sat in, but the fans who want to get tickets can't get in the stadium because you've sold the corporate tickets. It's the corporate ticket argument, which puts a lot of fans off. I would say this: it's no shame in not going to a game. I mean, I'm a Blackburn fan and I live in the south of England, so you can see how difficult that is, obviously, to get to and from on travel. It's expensive. A lot of clubs, I think the Notts County chairman was on Football Focus last weekend and basically said there's hardly any clubs in League One or League Two making any money. Most clubs are basically broke, and he's not wrong. But in the Championship, I will say this: it's a double-edged sword. I think 2 seasons ago, only 3 or 4 teams made a profit after tax. Every other team made a loss, and those 3 or 4 teams were mid-table teams. So, the battle to avoid relegation or the battle to get promotion is not the finances in football need to seriously be looked at. And the FA is showing how out of touch it is with the game. Obviously, there was in the news this week. They've told non-league clubs to enlarge their dressing rooms or face relegation, basically. But you cannot. These non-league clubs have had several years to sort out their dressing rooms. But here's the thing: they can apply for a grant to pay for X amount of the cost. Apply. That doesn't mean they're going to be granted the grant. And a lot of clubs are on a hand-to-mouth basis to survive, and that's grassroots football. And the FA claiming that the sale of Wembley would have helped with that. No, it wouldn't, because this is well before the sale was even thought of. This is 4 or 5 years ago they planned this. They're saying enlarge your dressing rooms or face relegation. If they can't afford it, they get relegated, which means they make less money. And a lot of non-league clubs are on a hand-to-mouth basis, and the professional contracts only go down, I think, to the National League South and North, really. Yes, but I do. So there's that issue. But Peterborough, yes, there are a lot of clubs in League One that want to be in the Championship. I think that's the ultimate goal. Peterborough have been in the Championship before, but Peterborough, I think, have this issue. I've got literally those of being a yo-yo club where they get in the Championship and they play really well in League One the season before, they get promoted, they stay in the Championship for a season or two, and then they just cannot keep the goals out. They can't keep enough clean sheets. They can't keep the goals against down, and they become a yo-yo club. So I don't know how the Posh's finances are. I understand that there is the drive, and Peterborough is, got a very passionate fan base, but they have of being this yo-yo club between League One and Championship. I think they are too good for League One, but they're not good enough for the Championship. There are a lot of clubs like that which are sort of stuck between leagues and have that reputation. If they do make it to the Championship, they've got to recruit wisely. They've got to pick up a couple of players that can play that level and gel them into the squad quite quick. And they've got to stabilise in the Championship. I think the ultimate goal for any team is the Premier League, but we've seen that always doesn't always work out. So we'll see. Hopefully, I thought the Peterborough capacity was a lot more than 5.52. I did. I thought their stadium was bigger. I thought your stadium was bigger, honestly. But again, that comes down to into improving facilities. That comes down to getting the right sponsors in. That comes down into being good in the transfer market, and the transfer market's overinflated now. So to find a bargain deal is very, very difficult. But it comes down to a variety of things, and I think investing in the infrastructure at the club is part of the process, and I think that could also be holding Peterborough back somewhat. But hey, if the football club goes to shit, you've always got the ice hockey team and the Phantoms down the road. So there is that. I don't understand reducing capacity. If you drop down a league, you want to keep the fans coming in to make money. I do not understand going from a 9,000 capacity by halving it. I do not understand the logic, because you have fans in the local area. You have that kind of. I just do not understand. I know we've gone down a league. It's going to be tight. We'll reduce capacity. It makes no logical sense, and it does put fans off coming to watch, regardless of what league you're in. If your stadium's that capacity, it should stay that capacity. I have no idea why clubs routinely fence off bits or tape off bits and reduce capacity. I really do not understand that. It makes no logical sense. If the club wants to grow and make money, and this is why clubs are struggling, because they use this, oh yeah, we're in the lower league, we're going to draw less, clearly. And that's not necessarily the case. Some clubs regularly sell out in the lower leagues. So it's not the case that when a team is in a lower level, they're going to draw less fans. It's not the case at all. No, football fans can watch ice hockey. I mean, I've taken a couple of hardcore football fans to ice hockey matches, and they've actually really enjoyed it. I took my cousin once. He to his first ever game, and he was really out of his depth. I will admit that. He didn't quite know what to make of the, but he'd been going to Yeovil games since he was a kid, and I said, "Look, we got this. Bad weather will not stop play. They hurt each other. There's no diving, and he just sat there observing everything. Bearing in mind, he's a fully grown bloke, but he sat there observing everything, and he was like, he didn't quite know what to make of the sport for the first time watching it. But I think I'm slowly going off football as time goes on. Because what we've heard today in the media, or released late last night over here in Europe, was the Der Spiegel magazine in Germany has been doing some undercover reporting again. They're very good at this. And they're normally pretty accurate with their reporting as well. I'll give Der Spiegel some fair credit. They've unearthed secret meetings that were taking place between 11 clubs that wanted to form their own little Super League across Europe, including Manchester United. And there were going to be 5 invitee clubs for the inaugural season. And they planned to have this Super League, breakaway league, in 2021. And Der Spiegel has unearthed these secret meetings, and Bayern Munich is one of the clubs. And Bayern Munich being a German club and Der Spiegel being a German magazine, it was kind of interesting. Bayern Munich's response saying, "Yeah, no, we weren't involved in any meetings," and it was a really, really, really poor attempt at basically denying what we know. We've heard rumours of this secret Super League for about 4 or 5 years now. It's nothing new. But the Der Spiegel, the Der Spiegel article and an investigation seems to have some weight to it. And UEFA have basically told these clubs, no, you can't do this. Will be heavily sanctioned. And if you decide to come back to the leagues you were currently in, you may be relegated from them or thrown out. So UEFA have basically said, no, we'll punish you. But UEFA have shown up in this same investigation to have aided clubs to avoid financial fair play rules such as PSG and Man City. So there is, again, issues within the game. Yes, the Rebel Super League, the Super League Wars, and I could do a video on the Super League Wars and get the old whiteboard out at some point. I'll have to do it without the headset, mind, because the cable will get caught up and it'd be difficult to do stuff. But I might have to do um, a video on the Rugby League Super League Wars in Australia, because what has led out of that is now a very decent level of rugby league in Australia, the NRL, and yes, there are flaws with the NRL, with the flaws in the salary cap and the fact that they don't have teams in Perth and Adelaide, or Darwin, if you really want to brave it, with the tropical heat, and it's on the East Coast. But the positive result is the NRL. The positive result is over the last 20 odd years, the Australians have been the best rugby league international team the world has ever seen. But yes, the Super League wars in rugby league in Australia nearly damn near destroyed the sport. And this is why the Super League in the UK was set up in 1995. Was part of that Super League war in Australia. The Super League over here was set up in 95. And for a while Australia was destroying itself rugby league wise with the Super League wars, Super League here in the UK was the dominant rugby league. Not the case now, but 23, 24 years ago, yeah, the Super League being set up was dominating the rugby league world. The Great Britain national side was pretty good. The England national side was pretty good. The quality of player being produced and the quality of Australian player or New Zealand player coming over here to play was of a higher level as well. Now, not so much. The tables have turned because of the stability in the NRL and the issues with the Super League, with the Super 8s format and fans staying away and not growing the game outside of the north of England. It's an interesting conundrum. But yes, the Super League wars and the Breakaway Super League NRL battle, which had Rupert Murdoch involved, and it led up to obviously the Melbourne Storm being set up as part of the NRL process. We can debate the Melbourne Storm, the pros and cons of the Melbourne Storm with their salary cap breaches and hidden secret contracts for Cameron Smith and Billy Slater, the delightful people that they are, because Billy Slater's never committed any foul play and Cameron Smith never completed any foul play when they did, and they got away with it because they seem to have the refs in their pocket. But yes, no, the Football Super League, UEFA have said you do that, you'll be sanctioned, by your own domestic competitions as well, and you risk. I don't know. I think also, because it's a cross-continental league rather than just Champions League, and it will obviously have a league season, travel costs, all sorts. We'll have to see. But the league has already come under fire for trying to play games in the US, so I can see this being not a successful venture by these clubs and a big mess. Yes, Rupert, the slimeball Murdoch. Yes, his involvement with the NRL was conscientious in the beginning. He doesn't obviously have any involvement now, but the early years he did. News Corp did have an involvement. The Melbourne Storm being set up was part of getting the end or ending the Super League wars. And what I find really funny is the NRL was actually at 20 teams when it first set up, and it had teams in Adelaide and it had teams in Perth, and it decided to withdraw from those markets. And focus on having too many teams in Sydney and focused on South Queensland far too much with Brisbane, and now obviously the Gold Coast Titans basically being the second Brisbane team. So there's only 3 teams in Queensland. The Canberra Raiders are the only one of 2 teams, I think, we'll call them New South Wales, that isn't in Sydney technically, with the others being St George Illawarra. And you've got the New Zealand Warriors, obviously, on the North Island of New Zealand. I think if you really want to be taken seriously, you've got to grow it to at least 18 teams, have a team in Perth, have a team on the South Island of New Zealand, to increase the participation of New Zealanders in the sport. Maybe whack a team in Adelaide. Again, I know Adelaide is Aussie rules country and there isn't necessarily the corporate money behind it, but yeah, maybe even in a team in Tas, because I know, again, Tasmania's more cricket Aussie rules, but there's an opportunity just to put the feelers out and see, what the response would be from potential fans. Tasmania, because I think Tasmania gets regularly overlooked. It's a good stop-off point between New Zealand and Australia. Um, and yeah, I think it would be nice that Tasmania got some recognition. It's the same with the Northern Territory and Darwin. I think Darwin is, a fast-growing city. Perth's a fast-growing city. I think Adelaide may not have the necessary corporate backing, but Darwin's growing rapidly, population-wise. And Perth is a young city as well. I do think they are taking these regular season games on the road to Perth and Darwin, and getting good crowds when they play their games there. So the TV deal agreement's coming up. The next player bargaining agreement's coming up. There are issues with the salary cap. But yeah, no, Melbourne is an interesting city because obviously the VFL, Aussie rules, the Victoria Football League. And again, it's more of an Aussie rules cricket country rather than rugby league. But the only way the NRL is going to be able to compete with AFL long term and have that kind of national reach is to put a team in South Australia and to put a team in Western Australia, and maybe possibly withdraw from New Zealand, because the Warriors never win anything anyway, and try and get the New Zealand Rugby League to form its own professional league, because I don't know, it's a complicated issue. I think 20 years ago in the Super League was, I've got to sort my freaking curtains out. I'll be back in a second. The lights on. Fucking head. Now I don't have light blaring in my eyes. But anyway, back, where were we? Yes. Well, obviously that could be interesting, how the Australian fans react to that. The Australian cricket has come out, obviously, in the last few days with their internal review into what happened with the ball tampering and the culture, and has basically said, it was the nothing was right with the culture of the Australian cricket team. They freely admitted that the dressing room culture and the culture within Australian cricket from top to bottom was rotten to the core, with bullying claims and racism claims and cheating claims, and if they've done that, we'll have to see the from the Australian fans. I wouldn't be surprised that they stay away. They showed with the Football World Cup they weren't happy with the TV rights and the fact that it was a pay-per-view service, and very, very quickly they were like, we've screwed this up, because they've been very, very good with the TV rights in Australia, having a good. It doesn't matter what league it is, be it AFL or rugby or NRL. They will at least show some regular season games every weekend, free to air. They'll have some on Fox or Sky or whatever it is, and then they'll have the others on the Nine network or whatever network, free to air. But the UK peak of popularity of the sport. We win the Ashes, and as soon as the Ashes have their parade in London, the same day, the ECB were like, we'll just sign everything over to Rupert Murdoch. And the sport has struggled ever since. And viewership figures are falling ever since. It's a known fact that if you put sport on free-to-air TV and you don't oversaturate the market with it, fans, they'll see enough of it to go, I like this. And they'll go down to their local club and they'll go down to their local stadium and they will pay to watch in the ground. So the ECB is under a lot of fire for its TV rights. And the Cricket World Cup next year, we don't know, is there going to be any free-to-air coverage? Probably not. It's probably all going to be on Sky, and people aren't going to turn out. And there's an opportunity next year to really grow the sport in the UK again. And obviously, Sky and BT are killing. I think are strangling sport. I really, really do. I think they're obviously the short-term investment. The short-term games haven't led to long-term success. And we could debate TV rights again and again and again, and it's not going to go away. Well, Cricket Australia's just been a mess. I think the chief executive has resigned. Um, the actual internal investigation highlighted so many issues of the game and the culture within the game and allegations of all sorts. The chief executive of Cricket Australia, or one of the guys involved high up in Cricket Australia, has quit. Um, but whether you're still in a minority or a majority in feelings towards how the sport is governed down under, I don't know. Yeah, Peevers, I think his name was. um, what I'm finding more and more is when I do live streams or I'm on forums, and a lot of people are now getting pissed off with subscription TV. They really are, especially when it comes to sport. 18 million households or something, or 13 million households, including up to 18 million people, do not pay Sky for Sky or BT Sport or Premier Sports. They want free to air sport, and Premier Sports realised this here in the UK, and they released a channel called Free Sports. And if you have a full HD Freeview box or full HD Freeview TV, you can watch. And they're starting to get more and more TV rights for sport. So I don't know. A lot of people. There's a reason why VPNs are so popular, and there's a reason why, you know, the I do believe honestly subscription TV will die soon. I think there'll all be free to air networks competing for that market because of the evolution of the online streaming, where people just find and stream it for free. They don't care. They've had enough of being the rip off prices and the poor quality journalism, as we saw with the BBC at Leicester City with Dan Rowan the other day. The the TV rights deals are always big talking points. There's always that short term money, cash injection into a sport or to a league, but then long term, uh, the long. Uh, I, but again, it is interesting with the change in how media is accessed. Uh, but more and more, especially the young generation, my generation, they are turning off subscription TV in droves, or they're regularly complaining about the prices they have to pay. Like let's say a boxing pay per view, you pay X amount of dollars or pounds or euros or whatever currency you're using as your denomination, and the fight is over in the first round, and you're expecting a lengthy bout, and it's done and dusted in a minute. Yeah, it's not a sustainable uh, business model for me, anyway. I honestly think the amount of people who dreamed the Conor McGregor fight with Mayweather. Well, it comes down to I found loads of websites where I can just watch games for free. Um, I know I really shouldn't say that on YouTube, but yeah, I've reached a point where it's not financially viable for me to pay for subscription TV. It's just I cannot afford it. I cannot justify spending that kind of money on a monthly or yearly basis. Uh, I it's the cost and the rising cost year on year. Their subscription fees are going up. They get you hooked in to the subscription TV on the introductory offer, and then they screw you long term. That's pretty much what Sky and BT Sport and any other on TV companies been doing, because they're losing viewers. They've got to keep money up. We are at a crossroads here in the UK, though. I mean, I don't know what it's like in Australia with the media coverage as such. But over here in the UK, BT Sport is being propped up by its internet and mobile phone providing side of the company of BT. And we could see another massive TV company collapse, which we've seen twice before, in the last 20 years. And I really concerning. Oh yeah, no, people are doing it regularly. There are some sports that have worked out they can stream, onto YouTube and Twitch. NASCAR do it. World Rugby does it with some of the minor tournaments of rugby union, and it's a good quality, feed as well. That they do have some good quality games. There are some lower levels of rugby league in Australia that do it on Bar TV Sports. Check them out if you're a YouTube if you're into that, if you want to like your rugby league. They do it with Aussie rules in the Northern Territory as well. So there are some sports and some leagues that have realised we might as well go into free online streaming or cheaper streaming than TV deals. We've seen it with British ice hockey where teams regularly stream their games online. Sometimes there is a small fee to it, and other times it's free, but they are going down this route more and more often, bypassing the TV deals altogether. They're going straight to internet, bypassing TV altogether. You don't have to have a TV license to stream, and I think that's another thing that's going to change is how people access their media is going more and more online, and a lot more people are giving two fingers to the copyright laws and they're giving two fingers to mainstream media because there is a disconnect now as well. I am seeing a lot more of this, and YouTube has its own problems, but Twitch as well. We've discussed the rise of esports, the computer gaming. Twitch has a lot of that esports competitions free to wear. So we are seeing more and more people are ditching your traditional media and even online media to a point as well. There is a way of accessing, and people are going on the illegal streams, or they're going and they're trying to find access elsewhere, and they're doing it more and more often. And the big leagues and the big TV companies are spending thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, pounds, euros, pesetas, whatever currency you're using, in trying to stop fans from accessing their material. Because fans feel priced out. Fans feel regularly priced out by the way the sport, is covered, and how much they're forced to pay. And what I find really funny is when in the early 90s the Premier League came about and Sky Sports became massive, we were told that ticket prices would stay low because the TV deal would be a cash injection for clubs, and that is a load of crap that we were sold, and the ticket prices have gone through the roof. We were told when Sky Sports came along, and then ITV Sport and Setanta and BT Sport, all these big subscription TV companies with pay-per-view and subscription sports, that the ticket price on the turnstile would go down. And that is a lie that we've been sold for 25 years. Ticket prices are going up and up and up and up and up, and fans are staying away. They're relying now on the corporate sale of tickets, so it's paid attendance versus actual attendance. And there is a point now where, especially in the last decade, where wages have much compared to inflation and prices. There is a point where it's breaking point, because I always say this: empty seats look really, really shit for live TV or a live internet stream. If you are showing a product where you've got a half-empty stadium, it doesn't look like it's a good selling point. Like this is a league that's selling itself. And a lot of people are going straight to the finding ways around paying. Yes, it is theft, but I think it's becoming more prevalent with the fact that fans regularly feel priced out, regularly feel taken for granted. And I think we're now seeing more free-to-air TV rights here in the UK for individual sporting events like internationals, and we are now seeing occasionally rugby union games, domestic club games, again now coming back onto free-to-air TV, which is a godsend, because I love what rugby. It's beautiful. Obviously, we've got this 3-test series between England and New Zealand in the rugby league. We now have 2 TV networks showing free-to-air of the rugby union autumn internationals. Not England, though, because they're all on Murdoch's Sky, even though he's losing control of Sky, because the RFU have done exactly the same as the FA and exactly the same as the ECB here in the UK, and sold their soul to make as much money as possible and not give a toss about the fans at home. So that's an issue that's been around for a while, especially with rugby union, with England, the autumn internationals. They've been on Sky for over a decade now, 15 years. But Channel 4 is now getting some of the rights over here in the UK. BBC's still got some of the rights here in the UK. So we have decent coverage of the home autumn internationals, what you would call the spring international series. Obviously, the World Cup next year, free to air. That's enshrined in stone. If they were to take that away, I think they would, really harm sport long term. But it is a regular battle that comes up. It's a regular topic that comes up. Is again the price of sport. How much have they gone too far with the TV rights deals? Are they are, is it we are the bread and butter? You price us out. Who's going to want to go to games? And the NRL is regularly, criticised sometimes for crowd numbers, especially at ANZ and Allianz, and possibly are there too many clubs in Sydney? It's a really interesting debate point. Really interesting. Sorry. But no, the questions that get asked about TV rights and streaming rights and sponsorship prices, they're coming more and more often. They are becoming more of a regular thing, and I'm just interested in what price the tickets are going to be. Here's an example of the Major League Baseball, New York Yankees, Boston Red Sox games in London next year. That's going to be an interesting. How much of those tickets are going to be going for, and who's going to have the TV rights for those games? Yes, I understand there are baseball fans here in the UK, and yes, there is a amateur league here in the UK. There is a team in Bracknell that plays baseball, but here where I live. But what actually is the audience size going to be for Major League Baseball, especially when the Cricket World Cup is on at the same time? I mean, that's I don't know if they've chosen the right time to play those games. If you know what I mean. I'm just not sure on the actual fan base. I know the NHL have played games and Sweden. Yes, the Invictus games were on free to air. They were well covered. They were always well covered because obviously Prince Harry is the reason why we have the Invictus games. They were very well covered over here. Obviously, the time difference. How many people would have watched them, I don't know, but they did get a fair bit of press coverage on free to air TV, and I think that was important because I don't know what the coverage was in Australia, but they did get good coverage. I think it's partly to do with Prince Harry and his drive to set up. Last year's Invictus Games in Canada got good coverage as well, not just here, but in Canada. So it's got some good coverage. And I think, that's important. Paralympic sport, okay, maybe not necessarily have the same appeal as able-bodied sport, but I think it's because it's Prince Harry. And the way he's driven that, and he's given these ex-servicemen and women a hope in life because as a son of an ex-former soldier, son of a soldier who's since passed away, but a lot of homeless people and people on struggling with mental health and housing issues and poor employment prospects are ex-servicemen and women. They don't get the support post their time in the armed forces and the police or whatever it may be as they should. So I think that's more of a social thing as well. But yes, it did get very it was heavily covered on the news. It got free to air coverage, lots of newspaper articles, web articles. It was well covered by the media, really well covered. It always is because it is Prince Harry's brainchild. He really came up with this. He's been a driving force behind it since the beginning, and I think that's his brainchild. I think he will always continue to support while he physically can. Partly because he served with some of these people. I think the reason why he set up the Invictus Games is one of his army colleagues was severely injured and disabled, and I think it was their brainchild, and he is the driving force behind it, and has been the driving force behind it since its inception. Yeah. Yeah. Ex servicemen. There is a training course, Army Training College in Chepstow, which is on the border between England and Wales, here in the UK. And my dad was lucky, and my uncle was lucky that they went through that. Partly when they were doing their army training anyway, because my dad was a Royal Engineer, my uncle was a Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineer. But when they both came to leave the army, they went through the training college and ended up, both working in the motor industry. My dad till the day he died, and my uncle still works in the motor industry here in the UK. But again, it's not well advertised that you have this opportunity when you come to decide to, I want to call it a day, to go through this. It's the same with the Navy and the Air Force. They do have their attached, basically sixth form, as we would call it, or university courses. There are educational training courses available. But if you're a mainstream squaddy, if you're a mainstream rifleman, you are just trained to kill. You don't have that secondary skill like the signaller would or an engineer would in engineering or radio communications or something like that. But yeah, no, it's far worse in America. It's really bad in America, with the amount of people who are destitute and homeless or get involved in crime, being ex-servicemen, because these guys are trained to kill. For up to 25 years, they are trained in nothing but killing. And they're regimented. They get that. It's like going to prison. You get institutionalized. It's like you're in the same job for 20 years. You get used to that routine, and when you finish that job or you retire from that job, you find a lack of belonging. It is bad. I think 40 to, depending on the source, and I've been homeless myself at times. I think depending on the source, 40 to 60% of homeless people have served in some capacity, be it as a civilian, and I've been a civilian contractor for the MOD over in the UK, or actually as a soldier, or sailor, airman, marine in the armed forces. It varies from year to year and survey to survey on a location, but if you look at all the surveys, let's say they look at London, let's say they look at Birmingham or Newcastle or Glasgow, they look at a major urban area with its homelessness, and even on smaller urban areas, the homelessness, it depends on location, but we're averaging between 40 and 60%. Some locations is a lot less. Some is like as low as 2% of the population in that area is ex-service, but other areas is as high as 60. There is a lot of people forget there's a big civilian support element to the armed forces around the world, and it's an interesting one, because a lot of when rugby union was amateur until 1995, a lot of the players were servicemen and women, and Richie McCaw in New Zealand, he's now joined the New Zealand Air Force post rugby. The Underwood, was it the Underwood brothers? Yeah, the Underwood brothers, both military. So there is that connection with sport and the military as well. And the Invictus Games slots in beautifully. And again, Prince Harry, massive rugby fan as well. And he's clearly supporting the Paralympic sport kind of with the Invictus Games. And I think it gives them a purpose in life. And sport is a great social equaliser. I've always said, give young kids and people something to do, and they'll do it. And it brings a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't be interested suddenly in sport as well. So there are a lot of positives out the Invictus Games, and it did get good TV coverage. And that's something that again is brought up is funding. And Olympic funding and Paralympic funding. And I don't know what the funding situation is like in Australia for sport. And Australia is a sports-mad country, and same with South Africa and New Zealand. Some of the Commonwealth countries like Canada, South Africa, New Zealand, and Australia, they are, there are. I don't know what the funding works out at from state level, but what is interesting is each of these individual countries has their own national sport. So ice hockey is seen as the national sport. Australia, it's split between Aussie rules and rugby league and cricket. They really drive and rugby union as well. They're really driving those sports. New Zealand, it's rugby union, followed by rugby league and cricket. South Africa, it's cricket and rugby union. So they really do drive these sports, and there's a lot of scholarships involved, and there's a lot of working with the education system, not just sports clubs to you know. I used to do cross country running. That's not a surprise at all. I used to do it. The cross country side of running is under. It's not getting the coverage it should get, because I call that like the Ironman kind of thing, and some of those cross country runs. We do get them on free to air when it comes to UK athletics. We do see marathon runners also do the cross country. It does get some TV coverage over here. There's a cross country tournament that takes place every year around Edinburgh around this time of year as well. It's an interesting topic, but track and field athletics and cross country athletics, there's been obviously the issues within how many of these athletes are doping, how clean is track and field. Track and field is a sport or a group of sports that is its image is destroyed by drugs cheats, and I don't know how track and field athletics and cycling, for that matter, have been so overwhelmed by allegations of doping and cheating, whereas other sports seem to have less issue with it. I'm not saying it's not there, but it's a real difficult one. Doping in sport has always been a thing, but why cycling, track and field is prevalent, whereas other sports have individuals doing it rather than institutionalized? I don't know. I don't know what the solution is to track and field and cycling doping. I really don't. But I think it's a debating point. Ow, that's my ear. I'll just break my headphones, my expensive headphones. But no, it's interesting because whenever you come on live stream, some of the questions you ask, okay, that just highlights your poor sense of direction and following, the course. So that's on you. The fact that the course organisers had to go find you is a bit concerning, and the fact you regularly went off course is a bit concerning. That maybe I wouldn't want you map reading in a situation. If we were conscripted and we had to fight tomorrow for the British Empire back in 1914, let's say, I wouldn't want you being my officer in charge of map reading. I really would like to survive the battle, because at the moment I'm actually reading a good book on Duke of Wellington at the moment. One of my favourite books. I've read this several times. I'm 3/4 of the way through. There's 2 books in this written by Elizabeth Longford. These were written in like the early 70s, late 60s. So this is the first book. And yeah, loss of direction, getting lost. There are a fair few anecdotes of soldiers misreading maps and getting a little bit lost and getting shot. It happens a lot in war. Yeah, you would be useless. I've got a lot of books on military history, hence why I have the second channel. I've got tons of it. If you look over here, you can just see, look at that. There's tons of them. Tons of books. You got All Hell Loose, Arnhem. That had a lot of map reading exercise failures. That we've got books on World War One, World War Two, the SAS. I've got several books on the SAS. I've got books on engineering history, of urban history, such as a book on London. This one. I've got books on, oh shit, what have we got over here? The Ardennes, a couple of other big books. I've got a book on Napoleon as well, his early military career. I've got books on Russia in 1812. I've got War and Peace. There's books down here as well, down there, which I don't read as much. There's books under the bed in storage. So I've got books everywhere. I've got, what other ones here we've got what have I got here? I've got a book on Stalingrad. That's a good one, because everyone dies in that. I've got, in the cabinet down here, there's a shed load of them. I'm not even going to attempt to get the cabinet because all this crap will fall off. I've got to be careful with that because I've got all my vape stuff up here. I've got my note diary, which I used to read notes from for the channel. I've got all sorts of crap. I've got DVD. I've got films. Big interest in military and history. I've even got a book on the battles of the Peloponnesian War down here somewhere. Where is it? I've got to find it now. What? Oh, Thucydides. Yeah, I've got a book on the Peloponnesian War that I read. So we're going back to pre-Jesus, and yes, it is true. They did it on Christmas Day in 1914. They attempted it in 1915 as well, and when they attempted it, some gas shells came over and they gassed each other. But no, they did do the. There was a 2-day truce. Film on it is there's a film that they made about it, an actual dramatization of the actual events of No Man's Land in 1914. Basically, there were some French soldiers who were involved, mostly British and German. Belgian soldiers refused. And on the Eastern Front, the Russians refused to do that with the Austrians and the Germans as well. But on the Western Front, the British and German soldiers primarily all along the line of where British positions were got out, and the Germans came out, and they were marching towards each other, and it was no one was quite sure what was going to happen. And then out of nowhere, someone produced a football, and a couple of impromptu games were played in the middle of a snowstorm as well. It was freezing cold. It was like not very warm. There was the occasional French unit that did so, but for the most part, they refused. The Belgians refused entirely. Then in 1915, there was an attack by a British unit, and one of the lads thought it'd be funny to bring a football and kick the ball all the way to the enemy front line. Let's just say that entire team didn't make it. There are some channels on YouTube that repost documentaries. There are some that do look at the weapons. There are YouTubers who go around going, "This is World War One vintage machine gun, World War Two." There are some that aren't full of crap. There are some that just look solely at the weapons and that kind of stuff. There are some online gamers who play historical games as well that look at Napoleonic War and things like that, and some of the units. They're kind of fun. The video gamers who have their channels, but it's oh god, my vape is leaking. Shit. Oh shit. I've got a leaking vape. Oh, that's not good. Oh hell. Oh dear, that's bad. Oh, fuck's sake. So I'm trying to quit smoking by using this, and now it's pissing the fluid out everywhere. That's not good. No, she's okay. She's okay. Yeah. It's interesting the link between military and sport because yes, on Christmas Day in 1914 they did play a game of football. It is an interesting period of history, especially any kind of military history, and there is a sporting link, to various things. I would say horse riding, military training, any kind of horse racing pre 1914 was those were the officers and they would be riding horses into battle. So yeah, there was a military element to that. They also worked out during World War One and World War Two. This has worked out that team sports were very, very good for morale as well. So you'll notice when you watch documentaries about Nazi megastructures, they show footage of German soldiers on the Atlantic Wall playing football. They were encouraged to do so in their downtime. They were actually encouraged to do this by their officers to keep their fitness levels up. You'll see, especially in the World War documentaries on 1 and 2, you'll see behind the lines the players having impromptu football matches. The soldiers, the airmen, the naval marines, they would have a kickabout. The Americans would play baseball. Oh, here we go. And again, more crowd trouble at Scottish football. It's just becoming a thing now. We've seen it in the European games that the Scottish teams have played in the Europa League, crowd disorder, violent disorder. We've now seen the sectarian side of things again, and being thrown, and racism. It's great. Scottish football is a lovely thing right now. My sarcasm is dripping. I think Scottish football really needs to get a grip. It's not I don't know what it is north of the border, but sectarianism. They just go nuts for it. They get a hard on for shouting sectarian and singing sectarian songs. It's like their lives are incomplete without a bit of religious hatred. This is a societal problem for Scotland. This is a societal issue for Scotland, because for some reason you go south of the border, you come here to England, and you can go to, okay, I wouldn't say Tottenham or Arsenal because there's a Jewish element that receives anti-Semitic abuse, but you can basically go to a football game, and you will have the effing and blinding, but you won't have the targeted sectarianism. You will have the occasional racist and homophobic chant, but there are issues with English football. But I don't know what it is with Scottish. The fact that Scottish football fans regularly show themselves up to be absolute trolls. They show themselves up to be morons, really, and they shame the sport. They shame themselves. Well, it's hit the mainstream now because it's on a YouTube channel, and people will watch this live stream over and over again. Look, we saw with Neil Lennon in the Edinburgh Derby and his comments, and and then players and officials getting attacked. No, Scottish football has a problem. We've seen it with Celtic fans in Europe regularly, sectarian chanting. We've seen it with Rangers fans in Europe regularly, sectarian chanting, especially if they're playing in a primarily Protestant city. The Celtic fans regularly shame themselves. Rangers fans regularly shame themselves. Go back to 2008 in Manchester, the Europa League final, when they just destroyed the city centre because the big screen broke. They regularly, shame themselves domestically and in European competition. This is why I'm running out of sympathy for the Scottish game. I know I've done a lot of videos on Scottish football, and I've got a lot of viewers and subscribers from Scotland, but the sport itself needs to get a fucking grip. The SFA have proven itself incompetent. The football clubs themselves are not doing enough to ban those guilty of racist, sectarian, or football-related violence for life. Just ban them for life. It's so much easier. Don't even ban them for a period of time. Ban them for life. Just make sure they have a banning order from the fact they can't even go to any of the club shop or ground. But if this is 100% confirmed that at several different games there's been these flashpoints, it shames Scottish football yet again. It really does. Hearts and Hibs the other day shamed the oh god, yeah, you're gonna have some sectarianism there. Not gonna lie, there's gonna be some chanting there. I will say this. Celtic fans, I know you're a Celtic fan, but Celtic fans regularly shame Scottish football. Hearts fans regularly shame Scottish football. If there's a riot, I couldn't care less. I think Scottish football deserves to be in the gutter. If the fans continue and the clubs do not stamp out the vile nature of some of the incidents, then it's always going to be a league that isn't taken seriously. The hooligan element seems to be on the rise. The clubs don't do enough. The SFA has shown itself to be absolutely hopeless at governing the game north of the border, completely out of its depth, needs complete structural reform. It is what it is. It is what it is. Scottish football is in the gutter because its fans are in the gutter. No, just no. Alcohol at Scottish football grounds? Are you mad? They can't behave when they're sober, let alone when they're pissed. The SFA are seriously risking having riots on a daily basis at Scottish grounds up and down the land. It doesn't matter if it's in the Scottish League 2 or the Premiership. There is a risk of violence daily. And everyone says the hooligan element's an English problem. I've actually, talking about hooligans, talking about that, I've got these books on the subject. I've got 2 books on the subject of the hooligan gangs of British football. Um, it's unbelievable. You know, it is unbelievable that the SFA are considering the alcohol ban at stadiums in Scottish football. I really cannot believe they're going down this route. Just look at the trouble so far today and the trouble in the week. This is why I think the SFA are not fit to govern the game in Scotland. They've shown themselves incompetent time and time again. I don't know what it is about football fans, but you look at rugby union. For the most part, there's the occasional incident in rugby league, but for the most part, rugby league, pretty sensible bunch. Good voice, good banter, I think, in rugby league. There's a few bad eggs. Bit of rivalry with some teams that gets a little bit too much, but for the most part, it's good banter. Ice hockey fans, for the most part, there's again idiots. They seem to behave themselves, hence why they're allowed alcohol in grounds, because they can behave themselves. If they allow alcohol back in to Scottish Football League grounds, you're going to have. They're already proving they cannot behave sober. You know, the SFA obviously planned with the SPFL to have the doubleheader at Hampden Park. That was just going to be a bloodbath. And, you know, they are running the risk, seriously running the risk of severe disorder on a daily basis. Scotland has some social problems. And I find it funny that the SNP under Nicola Sturgeon aren't tackling some of these issues head on as well and taking national government involvement into tackling these issues. Because they're all about independence, you see, and living off the whiskey proceeds and oil proceeds because there's no oil left and the whiskey prices collapse because the SNP are smart. There is a political element to this as well. Both the Westminster government here for the whole of the UK and the Holyrood government aren't doing enough to tackle the violence at Scottish football games, and they're not doing enough to ensure that the sport is, organised and structured. Well, yeah, the old boys fighting is one thing, but bearing in mind, in Scotland there's a gang element as well of organised crime element to the hooliganism, to do with drug sales and stuff like that. If the SFA are serious about this, they deserve to all be sacked because you can just see the issues. Scotland has an issue with alcohol-related violence. It does. Hence why the minimum unit pricing of alcohol they try to bring in, not because of the health benefits, it's partly to get some more tax revenue because they realise the oil prices collapsed, but partly because there is an element of alcohol-related violence and gang violence in Scotland, especially around football. My concern is that I think security at grounds is poor, and also, yeah, I think there should be alcohol bans at stadiums. I really do. I've seen enough piss heads. You know, then I think they need to bring in an alcohol ban because we've seen it in rugby union with Eddie Jones and some of the where he almost he was getting attacked by rugby union fans, and that's really surprised me in a sport that is normally seen as pretty placid, with the fans can have a bit of banter, but generally it doesn't matter if it's club rugby or international rugby. The fans generally get along. Oh yeah, Buckfast Abbey. Yeah, that's worrying when an English drink is more popular than Tennant Super 80. Something's gone wrong with Scotland if they're drinking English alcohol. Something's gone seriously wrong there. I do think though that the SFA needs complete restructuring. The sport in Scotland needs restructuring and refinancing from top to bottom, and the willpower to do it or with the expertise to do it, and they're not willing to do it. Hence why Scottish football is no offence, it's shit. It is shit. It's not at the high enough standard to compete on the European level, and at club level, you just got to look at the poor behaviour of fans. They do shame the sport, and they've been shaming the sport up in Scotland for years. And I'm running out of sympathy for Scottish football. I really am. Don't get me wrong. I Oh dear, my vape is leaking all over the place. Fucking hell, what's happened here? Why are you leaking everywhere? Hmm. Um, but no, I do have concerns about Scottish football long term. I really do. I was having this conversation last weekend with a Scotsman who's lived down here since he was young. He's from Edinburgh, and he said to me that sectarianism was an issue outside of Glasgow. Well, clearly it is. It clearly, it is. If they're singing sectarian chants at a St Mirren game, um, I do think there there is a wider problem. There was footage last season posted by of Aberdeen fans sectarianly chanting in a pub in Glasgow after a game against Celtic or before a game against Celtic. So no, there is an element there at every club. Um, it's going to reach a crisis point. Uh, you know, the incident at the Edinburgh Derby is made national, if not international news now. And okay, the Edinburgh Derby finally has some, meaning again after years of the both clubs not being close to the top of the Scottish League. So it now really has, it's meaningful. It's always a meaningful game, but it finally has meaning in the actual position of the clubs in the league. But Neil Lennon, well, I do think he does bring a lot of the problems on himself. When he came as a player, he received a lot of sectarian abuse from both Catholics and Protestants. He got death threats, bomb threats. They've had a pipe bomb under his car once. They were sent bullets in the post. He was sent threatening packages on a daily basis. And then he became a manager, and that's where I really lost my patience for Neil Lennon. I really did. As a player, I didn't mind him, but as a manager, I can't stand him because he does wind up the opposition, and some of his antics on the touchline don't help his cause. But he has had 18 years of it, and there's got to come a point where you go, enough's enough. I don't know what you do to combat sectarianism. I really don't. I really don't. But we know of sectarianism. Look, my father served in the British Army in Belfast. There is obviously an issue, but I don't know how you combat it. I really don't. In this day and age, I'm saddened that right wing Catholics and right wing Protestants, because they're not left wing at all. Because if they were left wing, they would all be loving and hugging everyone. You know, it's just vile religious hatred that they need to get a grip. It's sad. It's cringe sad actually. Not watching non-violent sport instead. Yeah, I don't think they can do that. I think the average cave troll of a sports fan who will happily shout racial homophobic slurs can't. I don't think they can cope with something like that because they'll probably still, their tiddlywinks will probably have sectarian symbols all over them. And one of them will be orange with an orange sash over it. The other one will have an Irish harp. I don't think those who are shaming Scottish football today and over the last couple of weeks, I don't think they have the mental capacity to actually sit down and not be a div. I honestly think natural selection has given these morons a pass, because we are seeing it more and more. We are seeing a rise in hate crime. We are seeing a rise in intolerance in the UK, and it's it's shaming society. It is, but it isn't helped by some of the political things that are going on right now and the divisions that's brought about in the last decade or so. I don't think regional and national governments doing enough to tackle the issues behind what's causing the sectarian chanting and the violence. Scotland has some social problems that it doesn't want to admit to, it doesn't want to own up to, it doesn't want to tackle clearly, because if they're I know gang crime in Glasgow has fallen, and there has been a reasonably successful combating of the heroin epidemic in Glasgow and the gang violence in Glasgow. They've just gone back to going to football then. I think Scotland is too ashamed to tackle these issues. It doesn't want to tackle the social problems that occur in a lot of Scottish towns and cities. What used to be a minority turning into a majority or to becoming animal. Yeah, we could discuss this on. I can now live stream on the other channel now. So the History Boffin's now got live stream activated, but I don't think Scotland, the SNP government or the Westminster government is doing enough to tackle some of the social problems that are happening, not just in Scotland, but in many of our towns and cities. A lot of issues going on right now. And if the left wing keep blaming the cuts, these issues were happening long before austerity started in 2010. A lot of it's like the gang violence in London. This goes back decades. This has been going on since the 60s. So when they're blaming austerity cuts, they need to get a grip and actually go, no, these guys were killing each other before austerity. And what I find funny is when Boris Johnson was mayor of London, knife crime was falling. Sadiq comes in, it shoots up. It's got nothing to do with police budgets at all. It's to do with the direction that the mayoral office in London's doing. So I don't buy the austerity cuts as an argument for gang violence. Gang violence is there for a variety of reasons, and has been there when times have been good and bad. Some of the highest crime rates of London were actually in the Tony Blair eras of economic growth, 2008. So we could discuss that on the other channel because I don't want to go into politics and social ills, but there is a link between all the various things. It all comes back to basic problems in society of integration and stuff. And we've seen some pretty moronic comments. I've seen some pretty moronic comments on online forums and mainstream media websites where they allow the readers to have their own have your say on BBC and stuff like that. Yeah, there are some shameful comments out there, and there are some real moronic individuals. Oh no, but it's the SNP, so obviously they're not. No, the SNP are loonies. They really are, because their whole argument for independence was that they could rely on the oil and gas in the North Sea, and the untapped oil around Shetland and Orkney, and the whiskey, and the agricultural project. So now there's BSE in Aberdeenshire. The whiskey price has collapsed by 8 to 10%, and the oil price has dropped off a cliff because the Americans did some things called fracking. So the SNP economic argument isn't there, and they are failing in so many areas in Scotland. Hence why they've lost half their seats at Westminster and half their seats in Holyrood. They are starting to lose the argument. Their solution to all the problems is independence. No, the solution to problems is actually in local communities first. They couldn't give a fuck about Glasgow. They couldn't give a fuck about sectarianism. They really couldn't care less if Protestants and Catholics killed each other. They really couldn't. All they care about is getting independence for Scotland. After that, they don't have a plan. They don't have a plan. And that's what's actually fueling the sectarianism, because the Protestants are primarily unionist, and a lot of the Catholics that do live in Scotland are primarily, they want to have a separate entity. But then that also gets blurred because a lot of Celtic fans are from Ireland for some reason. There is the hooligan element in sport is there, it has been there, and in the 90s and 2000s, it reached a shameful peak with the issues at World Cup 98 and Euro 2000, where, it wasn't just English fans, it was also Scottish fans in 1998 as well, shamed themselves on a regular basis. And there was a massive crackdown, and there has been a massive crackdown. And for some reason, in the last, I would say 3-4 years, that crackdown is failing for whatever reason. And there seems to be on the rise again. But ironically, most of the hooligans involved are sons of former hooligans or current hooligans. So they're keeping it in the family. So at least we know who the hooligans actually are. They just don't want to do anything about it. The 80s was a bad decade. The 90s was a bad decade. There were regular issues. There still are. Even with the all-seater stadiums and the amount of security cameras, they're still doing it. They it just shows that football especially has a problem with its fan base, and a lot of football fans are generally not the smartest, brightest, sparks in the plug. They're not the brightest light bulbs. I don't know how you combat it. I don't, but I am seeing a rise of moronic behaviour at sports that haven't had an issue with hooligan elements as badly as football. I am seeing a rise of incidents at other sports, so it's not just football, but I do think in Scotland especially, it seems to be far worse in Scotland than anywhere else. I'm I would say I'm British. I live in England and I have Irish ancestry, both Protestant and Catholic. So yeah, there are a lot of people who are in the UK who have links to Ireland and the Catholic and Protestant side of it. I do think, especially, I don't know what it is about Scottish football, because Neil Lennon, when he gave his interview about what happened at Tynecastle, was quite clear that when he was playing and managing in England, he didn't have that kind of abuse, regardless of his background. He goes north of the border to play and manage, and it's been 18 years on, for the most part, of real vile stuff. He's not the only player. He's not the only manager to have this kind of abuse against. But the fact, I mean, seen last weekend Wilfred Zaha receiving death threats online. We've seen Karen Carney receiving death threats online the week before. It doesn't matter if you're male or female football player. The element of stupidity that football fans are showing. I don't know what it is about football, and it brings out the base instinct and the moronic instinct in so-called fans. But there is an issue within the sport of discrimination. There is an issue within the sport to do with racism, homophobia, sexism, bullying, abuse. I don't think. See, your family is very interesting. If your mum's side are Celtic and your dad's side is Rangers, and you haven't been, I'm surprised you're not a Partick fan then, just because you're so confused, or Queen of the South. But that is very interesting. That's very rare that you're going to have a Rangers fan and a Celtic fan breed. They're normally killing each other, and I mean that seriously. That is a very unique situation you're in, because you can see both sides of basically the hooligan element, and you're basically a neutral when it comes down to it, because your dad's side are clearly going to be the Rangers side of it, and I don't know how you tackle it. If you're part of this, is where people like you could be part of the solution. Saying, I've got relatives who are fans of both, and we live in harmony. I'm not sure about how your family works, and if you've had the old family reunion, it gets a bit dust up. But if people like you, who's got parents on both sides of the divide, that could help solve a hell of a lot of problems. I know a lot of the young people just can't stand the sectarian side of it. But in the last couple of years, Celtic, Rangers, Hibs and Hearts have shown, as their fan bases at least, not necessarily their players, how classless they are as football clubs, because the fans regularly misbehave and the clubs don't do enough to punish those fans behave, and they're regularly getting, told by UEFA, you're getting fined for sectarian chanting, you're getting fined for racist chanting, you're getting fined for crowd disorder. And this happens a lot with Scottish football. There has to come a point where it has to come down to player power, I think. If the players say, look, we're refusing to play if you guys continue along this vein of sectarianism and racism and homophobia, because Rangers are known for everything under the sun. Celtic, to a point as well. Hearts and Hibs have shown themselves to be classless organisations with the way their fans have acted. I would say the only way you're going to get change in Scottish football is if the players of all the clubs refuse to play unless the fans behave. When that happens, I think that might have an effect. I honestly believe that. I think if the players were to go, we refuse to play because the hooligan element, I think Scottish football might earn some respect back. I really do. There are the mainstream fans who obviously just want to watch the game. But unfortunately, this minority is dominating the headlines. It's rather than the majority singling them out and saying, we don't want this. I don't know what it is about Scotland and their fighting mentality. I don't know what it is about the Scottish society, and they've always got to have a fight to prove themselves. I just don't get it. Because it highlights the league badly, and it highlights the sport in a really negative light, and it highlights Scotland in a really negative light. That, yes, the UK as a whole has some social issues right now, and there are some issues that need to be tackled to do with integration, race, religion, political side of things. Scotland seems to be far worse, far more divided. The sectarianism, I just do not understand it. It's so 15th century. It's so 1600s. It's so outdated. I thought in the modern society we can move on beyond these petty little things, but apparently, there still is that. Oh, interesting. Yeah, but I wonder if the fans can behave. This is the I don't care about the result. It's more about will the fans behave, because the way the discussion we've been having is all about the misbehaviour of fans over the last, forever in Scotland for some reason. And if the Rangers and the St Mirren things are true, I'm assuming that's the St Mirren Rangers game. If that is true, then it doesn't matter what clubs are involved; they just cannot behave. And it's shameful that in this day and age, the lack of, it's just appalling. And and you'll see a complete difference when Scotland play Wales in the rugby union tomorrow. You'll see a complete difference and a complete different, fan base. You'll see respect between Welsh and Scottish fans. They'll even sit next to each other and mingle, and the game will be a battle between two very good sides on the pitch. For the most part, verbal abuse, you're going to have fans chanting and ribbing players. You get that. You're going to get the old F and blind. But Hamilton Livingston is actually a rivalry in itself because where the teams are located in the Central Belt. But Scottish football has a problem, and it is not tackling it. And it's had a problem for a very, very long time. Very long time. And the club, I think it's got to be the players eventually have to take a stand. Racism, sectarianism, homophobia, bullying, and abuse. I think if the players go on strike, then the fans might behave a little bit better. But there is an issue. I mean, the Scottish officials have gone on strike before because of the abuse they're receiving and then the threats against them. So if the referees, linesmen, and players go on strike in unity, then we might see a change in the Scottish game for the better. But as it stands, nothing's going to change because no one wants to take any action against, what's causing the problem, and B, how to solve it. Again, with what happened in the Hearts Hibs derby, the Edinburgh derby, yeah, that could get quite nasty with the sectarian element and the gang element. And the fact that this game means something for both clubs to run away the league. Hearts are the league leaders, and it does mean something, and that could get nasty. So we'll have to see what happens in the aftermath, what the media coverage is, and we've already seen if the Rangers, is it Rangers St Mirren, where there's been sectarian chanting and coin throwing. I don't know what it is with Scottish football. Scottish football has a problem right now. It really does. And I hypothetically asked this question. I know it's a difficult subject, but what happened at Leicester City last weekend? If that was to happen in a Scottish league club, I wonder what the reaction would be from the Scottish footballing world to a similar incident happening in Scottish football. What happened with Leicester City at the weekend? I really wonder what would be the what would be the reaction of fans and clubs, because we've seen in Scottish football a classless that is the Scottish football fan base for the most part, and it shames the game and it shames the sport. And I don't know what you do to tackle the issues in Scottish football. I'm going to have to look on the match report for the Rangers St Mirren game. I'm going to have to look that up, because again, I just wonder what would have happened. Let's say there's a bus accident and a team gets involved in a coming back from an away day. We've seen it with other sports like the Humboldt Broncos, the ice hockey, where the hockey team was killed on the bus, and we saw it with the ice hockey team that was killed in the air crash, and the football team in South America that was killed in the air crash. For some reason, yes, these sports have massive rivalries, but the regional sport or the sport in around the world just went silent. But with Scottish football, if a similar thing was to happen, where an owner, like what happened at Leicester, or a team was to be involved in an accident in some way, what the reaction would be. Because even with the Leicester City thing, I've seen a fair bit of inappropriate, some pretty disgusting comments made about the deceased. And the Dan Rowan comments, even on my YouTube, I've been trolled. That's why I did my troll video, where I'm not offended by what they say. I'm more offended by their poor grammar and spelling. Because I got some hideous abuse from one particular individual. And, I just wonder what the reaction would be if, let's say, the Rangers team bus was to have an accident and players or management was to be severely injured or killed, what the reaction would be from the rest of the Scottish footballing fan base and clubs. Would they support, or would they troll, or would they continue on what we've seen with the fans in the stadiums today, misbehaving and generally being scummy, classless? Same for Celtic. It doesn't matter what the club is. If a similar incident was to happen, what the reaction would be. I'll be very, very interested. I'm going to have to look at the St Mirren Rangers match report and see what the journalists have written. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't report too much. But you got to remember how long ago that Ibrox disaster was, and what's happened since then, socially in Northern Ireland with the Troubles, and with the hooligan element, getting really bad in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s with the casuals, and some of the social issues that have happened within Scotland because of high unemployment and industry having to change, the heavy industry of steel and coal not being what it was, and the oil industry again struggling somewhat. The Ibrox disaster was a very, very long time ago, and I'll be see. Yes, the Celtic fans were very, very supportful, but the sectarianism has changed somewhat with the Troubles flaring up in Northern Ireland in the 60s till the 90s. So there has been a lot of social changes, but I will say this, Celtic as a club always allowed Protestant players to play. Rangers did not allow Catholic players to play until very late on. So Celtic has always been more open for fans and players from a non-Catholic background to be involved. Rangers is a bit the opposite. So there has been that element as well. So it'd be interesting to see what would happen in today's day and age. I know the Ibrox disaster was a long time ago, but if it was to happen today, a similar incident with what happened at Leicester City or what happened to the Humboldt Broncos team bus, if a similar incident was to happen today in Scottish football, what the reaction would be, and how the sport come together, or would there still be this hooligan, vile element and sectarian element? Two things. That's what I'll be interested to see as an outside the box, because from what we've been seeing in recent months and weeks in Scottish football is there is an element of distasteful element that's rearing its ugly head more often than it should. But that's interesting that you mentioned the Ibrox disaster and the fact that Celtic, for the most part, were supportful, and yes, they were. I do think as time has gone on, though, the social tensions are there. But I've got loads of books on a variety of social and historical things. So I can always do my research and see, you know, element behind it, and why there is this element of hatred, which just shouldn't exist. Really, we're all human at the end of the day. And in 2018, we just shouldn't have to discuss this, surely. But sadly, it's becoming more and more discussable. Anyway, I'm gonna leave that there before I go off on a political, social rant. I'm trying to be sporty here. I'm trying to do a sports YouTube. It's mad. My other channel should have this. But no, it's interesting some of the points that have been raised. But the fact that, yeah, again, you know, at three separate games, there's been sectarian chanting, crowd disorder. It's shaming the league in Scotland. It really is. But there we go. I'm going to leave that there. Cheers for everything. I appreciate, obviously, all your questions, and I appreciate you being a moderator as well. So I appreciate, and everyone else who was on, I appreciate everything else. So I will obviously keep my eye out for what's happening today in the football, and I'll do some more videos, I think, later in the evening on what happens today in the football and any big stories that happen. So I appreciate it, and feel free to share my videos as well. If you've got a Twitter account or a Facebook, feel free to share them, and if that means that we can get a wider audience for the channel and grow the channel, that'd be much appreciated as well. But thank you. Cheers for all your questions, and the discussion we've had about Scottish football has been really interesting. I'm really surprised that more action hasn't been taken against this hooligan element. But anyway, cheers for your input, and I'll have some more videos for you later today. My vape fell off the thing.